Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय राधा गोपीनाथ, राधा गोपीनाथ श्री राधे। जय जगन्नाथ, जय जगन्नाथ, जय बलदेव, जय सुभद्रमयी। जय गौरानिताय, जय गौरानिताय, जय गौरानिताय, जय गौरानिताय। Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya, Ashtutara Sadashi Shrimati Divine Grace Bhai Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, BPT Founder Acharya, His Divine Grace Bhai Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Nithai Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from Canto number 3. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 21, Conversation between Manu and Kardama, text number 52 to 54. We'll just excuse me. We'll just read text number 52. Nayadaratamastaya Jatram Maniganarpitam Vispuraj Chanda Kodhando Ratena Trasayan Akhan Nayadaratamastaya Jaitram Maniganarpitam Vispuraj Chanda Kodando Ratena Trasayan Aghan Nayadaya Ratamastaya Jaitram Maniganarpitam Vispuraj Chanda Kodando Ratena Trasayan Agan Nayadaya Ratamastaya Jaitram Maniganarpitam Vispuraj Chanda Kodando
Jaitram Maniganarpitam
Dasayanagan Mataji Nayadaratamastaya Jaitram Maniganarpitam Vispurjach Chanda Godando Ratena Trasayan Agan. So I'll read the next two verses also. Swasanya Charanakshunam Vipayan Mandalam Bhuva Vikarshan Brihatim Senam Paryatasyam Asuman Iva Tadaiva Setava Sarve Varnashamani Bandhana Bhagavat Rachita Rajan Vidyeran Batadasyubihi. Okay, we'll go straight to word for word. Na, not. Yada, when. Ratam, the chariot. Astaya, having mounted. Jaitram, victorious. Mani, of jewels. Gana, with clusters. Arpitam, bedecked. Vispurjat, twanging. Chanda, a fearful sound, just to punish the criminals. Kodanda, bow. Ratena, by the presence of such a chariot. Trasayan, threatening. Aghan, all the culprits. Swasanya, of your soldiers. Charana, by the feet. Shunnam, trampled. Vepayan, causing to tremble. Mandalam, the globe. Bhuvaha, of the earth. Vikarshan, leading. Brihatim, huge. Senam, army. Paryatasi, you roam about. Amsuman, the brilliant sun. Iva, like. Tada, then. Eva, certainly. Setavaha, religious codes. Sarve, all. Varna, of varnas. Ashrama, of ashramas. Nibandanaha, obligations. Bhagavat, by the Lord. Rachitaha, created. Rajan, O king. Vidyaran, they would be broken. Bhata, alas. Dasyubhihi, by rogues. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam about the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet caused the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the Varna and Ashramas created by the Lord Himself would be broken by the rogues and rascals. Purport: It is the duty of a responsible king to protect the social and spiritual orders in human society. The spiritual orders are divided into 4 ashramas: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. And the social orders according to work and qualification are made up of the brahmanas, the kshatriyas, the vaishyas, and the sudras. These social orders according to the different grades of work and qualifications are described in the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, for want of proper protection by responsible kings, the system of social and spiritual orders has now become a hereditary caste system. But this is not the actual system. Human society means that society which is making progress towards spiritual realization. The most advanced human society was known as Arya. Arya refers to those who are advancing. So the question is, which society is advancing? Advancement does not mean creating material necessities unnecessarily, and thus wasting human energy in aggravation over so-called material comforts. Real advancement is advancement towards spiritual realization, and the community which acted towards this end was known as the Aryan civilization. The intelligent men, the Brahmanas, as exemplified by Kardama Muni, were engaged in advancing the spiritual cause, and the Kshatriyas, like Emperor Swayambhuva, used to rule the country and ensure that all the citizens all facilities for spiritual realization were nicely provided. It is the duty of the king to travel all over the country and see that everything is in order. Indian civilization, on the basis of the 4 varnas and ashramas, deteriorated because of her dependency on foreigners or those who did not follow the civilization of varnashrama. Thus, the varnashrama system has now been degraded into the caste system. The institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is confirmed herewith to be Bhagavat Rachita, which means designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, this is also confirmed. Chaturvanya Maya Shrishtam. The Lord says that the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is created by me. Anything created by the Lord cannot be closed or covered. The divisions of varnas and ashramas will continue to exist, either in their original form or in degraded form. But because they are created by the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they cannot be extinguished. They are like the sun, a creation of God, and therefore will remain. Either covered by clouds or in a clear sky, the sun will continue to exist. Similarly, when the Varnashrama system becomes degraded, it appears as a hereditary caste system. But in every society, there is an intelligent class of men, a martial class, a mercantile class, and a labor class. When they are regulated for cooperation among communities according to the Vedic principles, then there is peace and spiritual advancement. But when there is hatred and malpractice and mutual mistrust in the caste system, the whole system becomes degraded, and as stated herein, it creates a deplorable state. At the present moment, the entire world is in this deplorable condition because of giving rights to so many interests. This is due to the degradation of the 4 castes of Varnas and Ashramas. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Khadamayam Dhadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganar Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Mukum karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinatharinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. Hare Krishna. So we're continuing our discussion on how is it that Devahuti, this daughter of Swayambhuv Manu, was engaged with Kardama Muni, and how is it from them came children that were betrothed or married to many sages to propagate population throughout the universe. This is how this whole chapter began. Because of Vidura's enthusiasm, his desire to hear more about Krishna's creation, specifically about the Bhagavatas, the devotees of the Lord. He wants to know a bit more about how they propagated such high quality of persons throughout the universe. In fact, he wants to know more about this combination of Devahuti and Kardama Muni, and how their progeny, specifically the begetting of Kapila Muni, and how he propagated Sankhya philosophy. This is the main context of this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, after Kardama Muni takes instruction from Swayambhuv Manu and enters the forest near Bindu Sarovara, then he performs his tapasya. And due to his practice of tapasya, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu himself appears. And of course, Kardama Muni, being very honest, explains the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Explains how those who are non-duplicitous, those who are completely transcendental, free from material desires, they are meant to approach the Lord. And they are supposed to ask the Lord for service unto Him. Of course, those who ask the Lord for material benedictions, Kardama Muni says, are foolish. They're immature. But then Kardama Muni himself presents himself that, see, this is my situation. I need a wife. Of course, he explains it much more eloquently than I just did. But the Supreme Personality Godhead, being very pleased with Kardama Muni's performance of devotional service, grants his wish, but also gives him much more. He gives him so much more. He gives him his devotional service, he gives him his association, and he gives him guarantee that he will be able to be freed from the clutches of material existence and return him back to him. So once after this time, once in the forest, the Supreme Lord has explained, Swayambhuv Manu appears with his army, his family, hoping to gain the hand of Kardama Muni for his daughter, Devahuti. And once Swayambhuv Manu finds Kardama Muni, it's quite interesting how it's explained that because the Supreme Personality of Godhead had glanced upon Kardama Muni, all his austerities, all his tapasya, they didn't have much effect on his material body. In fact, it's mentioned that his body remained very youthful. Let's see if I can find this verse. This is text 47. Though he had engaged in austere penance for a long time, he was not emaciated, for the Lord had cast his affectionate sidelong glance upon him, and he had also heard the nectar flowing from the moon-like words of the Lord. So it sounds really good, right? Devotional service means that we'll be able to sustain this material body, enjoy for the rest of our lives with full vigor. That's what devotional service is meant for, right? We worship and appropriate the Supreme Personality Godhead that, please give me this, please give me that. And look, Kardama Muni asked for a good wife, a good marriage life, and see what he got from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How wonderful, right? He can perform all types of austerities and penance, and he won't be emaciated. That'd be great for us, right? We can enjoy the material world, we can struggle so hard to gain some enjoyment, and we won't be emaciated. We'll still remain some youthful beauty. And in such a way, we'll be able to enjoy material existence for the rest of our life. But is that what Kardama Muni hoped to achieve by approaching the Lord? In fact, did Kardama Muni even want this from the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Just like Dhruva Maharaj approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prishnigarbha, asking him or wanting to ask him a kingdom greater than even his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. But then what happened? He saw the Supreme Lord, and Swamin Kritatosmi Varam Nayache, that I've been searching for broken pieces of glass, but here you are, the greatest jewel. So I don't want anything else, my Lord. Swamin Kritatosmi Varam Nayache, I don't desire any benediction. Just having your presence is a benediction in of itself. So Kardama Muni, although he had such great benedictions from the Supreme Lord, we'll see as we continue in this chapter and the chapters to come, how Kardama Muni was able to engage everything in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's quite interesting, especially if you're reading it for the first time, how Kardama Muni and Devahuti performed their Grihastha ashram duties. So that will come, of course, and we will discuss in future classes. But Swayambhuva Muni saw Kardama Muni in this way. And a significant number of verses are invested in teaching us or explaining to us the situation in which this conversation is happening. The situation in which the mode of goodness was prominent. Because this is Satya Yuga. This is a situation that's completely beyond our imagination. We would have no idea what's happening in Satya Yuga, what to speak of the spiritual world. if not for Srimad Bhagavatam. Because our idea of Satya Yuga is that you go to a dark room and meditate. That's Satya Yuga. You know, right? Kritiyo Dhyayate Vishnu. That you meditate on the Supreme Lord. Yeah, you just go to some yoga studio, you know, you do a couple of gymnastic poses, hold your nose for a couple of minutes, and then close your eyes. That's meditation, right? But in Satya Yuga, the environment was conducive towards such activities, worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this environment, in this situation, Manu then approaches Kardama Muni and pays obeisances to him. And Manu's acting like the perfect emperor, the perfect king, the perfect monarch. Because a Kshatriya naturally offers respect to the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas are the head of society. And to reciprocate, Kardama Muni doesn't just get up and ask him what does he want. Kardama Muni then glorifies Swayambhuv Manu according to his position. In Krishna book especially, if you read Krishna book, when Sudama meets, when the Brahmana that Rukmini had sent meets Krishna, and Krishna is in his palace, when he meets the Brahmana, he sits the Brahmana down and doesn't immediately ask him, you know, what do you want? What have you come here for? Rather, he sits him down and he serves him and he starts glorifying him. In fact, he starts asking him how he's doing in his ashrama, how he's doing in conquering material nature. He starts talking about the Brahmana's duties. He doesn't immediately start talking about, you know, what type of work are you doing, how's it going, how much profit are you making. Prabhupada specifically mentions that this is the art. Of course, this is not Prabhupada's word, this is a paraphrasing, but this is the art of receiving others. That the Supreme Personality of Godhead was able to speak in relationship to the receiver's position, so as not to agitate his mind. If you talk to a Kshatriya about Brahmanical duties, if you talk to a Shudra about Vaishya duties, if you talk to any of the other castes of the other Varnas of their duties, same thing goes for the ashramas. It simply creates disturbance in the mind. Of course, this circumstance, this situation, Krishna's teaching by example how to receive a guest. And you should receive a guest according to their position. And this is what Kardama Muni is doing by glorifying Swayambhuv Manu. And you may seem that I think Kardama Muni is going a bit overboard, right? That, okay, we can understand the first thing he says, that you have gone for a tour on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You embody the protecting energy of the Supreme Lord. Okay, sure. You're the king, you're meant to enact or impose martial rule upon society so everyone follows their varnas and ashramas. But then yesterday's verse seems quite unnecessary according to our material intellect. You assume when necessary the part of the sun god, the moon god, Agni, the fire, the god of fire, Indra, Vayu, Yama, Dharma, Varuna, all obeisances to you who are none other than Lord Vishnu. That seems a bit too much now, right? It seems that he's flattering him, that Kardama Muni is flattering Swayambhuv Manu. But actually, as mentioned in yesterday's purport, Prabhupada's explaining that the king deserved all respectful obeisances from everyone because he's a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being a representative, as we chant or we sing every morning, Shakshad Dharitvena Samasta Sastre, that the spiritual master is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How? Because as a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's preaching Krishna consciousness and bringing all living entities back to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. He's a representative, and therefore he's given all respects due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is how society should see the king. Recently we were hearing from a Krishna Lila class, and there Bhava Prabhu was mentioning how Nanda Maharaj was so dear. He was the king of Braj. He was so dear to the citizens that although he had no issue, no son, no daughter, no child, and due to his advanced age, he was still trying. The villagers, or at least there was a recommendation that maybe we should go to the side of the Yamuna. by the mercy of the Yamuna, maybe you'll be lucky, or you have the opportunity to have a child. And by hearing this, the whole village, the whole township that was under Nanda Maharaj, they just moved out of love and affection for their protector, Nanda Maharaj. They just moved. They packed up their things and they moved. And later on you'll see that when Upananda explains that actually we're having struggles here, and so maybe we should move to a place. And everyone thought, yeah, for the sake of Krishna, let's just move. For the sake of Krishna's devotee and for the sake of Krishna, they were able to move. They were able to give up all attachments to that place. And you know what it's like to set up a place, to have a family, to have everything established. It takes such a long time to establish, and then on top of that you have your daily duties, and then you have the constant maintenance. They gave all of that up. They invested so much energy in it, and they gave it all up just for Nanda Maharaj, just for Krishna. So you can see the culture, you can see the class, you can see the art of living in the Vedic society, in Vedic civilization. And you can see that happening here in this verse. What's being glorified? The social system, the Varnashrama Dharma. Unfortunately, due to, as Prabhupada says, due to hatred, malpractice, and mutual mistrust, the whole system has been degraded. What is that? Hatred, malpractice, and mutual mistrust. When I heard this word, malpractice and mutual mistrust, this is most evident in the corporate world, right? As soon as there's some problem with a bank, for example, and that they've overcharged their employees, or rather their customers, they've somehow or other stolen extra money through some scheme, and there seems to be some sort of inquiry into their activities, immediately there is hatred, malpractice, and mistrust, because they went away from, they broke the trust practically of their customers. They veered away from the codes of practice, and so on and so forth. So in the same way, the Varnashrama Dharma has come to such a deplorable condition, known as the caste system, as we hear it today. So, but the thing is that when a bank goes through it, and it goes through its inquiry, do people let go of the bank? When a hospital goes through such a thing, do they let go of the hospital? There's rectification, everything continues, right? So why are we so hung up on the Varnashrama system and hatred of its caste, of the so-called caste system right now? Why is it like that? Why should we maintain, as devotees of Krishna in this Krishna consciousness movement, why should we maintain that viewpoint? We should not. We should let go of it, and we should understand the Varnashram Dharma as it is. Because it is the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. If you think about it, it's the very basics of human life. Right? This is the beginning of human life. In 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, Uddhava is asking Krishna, what is the progressive way by which one can attain you? And it's not the first time Uddhava asks Krishna in the Uddhava Gita. It's like the third time. And then Krishna explains in the third time the Vedic path. And there he's explaining to Uddhava how one comes to Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda, and then finally Bhakti Yoga. How one practices devotional service gradually in a way, on the way to Krishna through the Vedic path. And that begins with Varnashram Dharma. Because the one comes to the platform of human life. Then one slowly, gradually, according to one's proclivities, according to one's desires, one gradually becomes purified to the point of goodness, exemplified by the Brahmana Varna. One comes to that platform. When one comes to that platform, then one's able to accept Jnana Kanda. Then once one's able to accept Jnana Kanda, slowly Upasana Kanda, Bhakti Yoga. It comes in a slow progression. So it's part of Krishna's system. It is not a flaw. When you see the Varnashrama system, you hear about it, and then when you see it happening, or the improper application in society, we shouldn't have this negative effect. And society has brought about this negative connotation to the Varnashrama system. It's there, deep-rooted within the consciousness. Those who live within India, those who live without India, there's that idea. You go on the street and meet people. Sometimes you meet people, oh, this talks about the caste system, right? Hinduism talks about the caste system, right? I've lost track of how many people have asked me that question. And on book distribution, you don't have time to preach to them and give them a class on Varnashram Dharma. You just explain to them, you got it totally wrong. It's about one's qualities. It's about one's activities. Guna karma vibhagashaha. And you can explain to them that, you work an office job, right? What if I sent you out to do a construction job? In fact, you meet people working in construction, you tell them that, is this what you wanted to do? And they say, no, actually, I hate my job. I never wanted to do this, but I have to make money. And you ask an office worker, do you like your job? Some of them go, no, I just have to put, bread and butter. I have to put food on the table, so I have to do this job. But I hate it. I'm not satisfied with it. So you can see people are forced into situations where it's not according to their proclivities, according to their swabhava. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, two swabhava. There's the material swabhava and there's spiritual swabhava. The material swabhava, the material nature of a living entity, is to perform activities according to the modes of nature one has, the combinations one has developed or desired or come in contact with. Or as Kapila Muni says, Karanam guna sangasya. One has associated with those modes. By practicing their duties according to the modes of nature that they've acquired, they're able to relinquish, they're able to break through and gradually purify themselves to a higher level. This is the Varnashrama system. It's the beginning. As Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, he tells Arjuna that this Klaibyam smagama partha naitattvaya upapadyate. That how is this hridaya durbalyam, how is this impurities of heart, how has it come upon you? It's not befitting a person of the Aryan culture. So this, unfortunately, again, another misconstrued. It's another concept that's misconstrued in society. What is Arya? Unfortunately, a whole world war is based on this concept of Arya being based on one's physical traits. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Indologists and other speculators mention Arya as being a particular class of people that have come from a certain section of the continent. But no, Arya is that which, or an Arya is a person who is advancing human society. But what is the advancement? Towards spiritual realization. And Prabhupada explains that here. Prabhupada explains in the purport the 4 varnas, the 4 ashramas, explains that they're not hereditary. It's not based that just because my father or my forefather or my family is a Brahmana that I'm a Brahmana. Prabhupada explains that a doctor, just because he has a son doesn't become a doctor automatically just because his father's a doctor. He has to go through training. That's why the Brahmanas, even though they had the father as a Brahmana, it's conducive for them to become Brahmanas, of course. They're in that situation, they're in that environment. They took birth according to their qualities. They achieved that body due to the desires and activities of previous life. Yes, it's conducive for them to carry out that inclination to become Brahminical. But they become Brahmanas in name only if they're not properly trained. And that is the duty of Gurukul. They become trained as Brahmanas. Right? So it's all about that training. It's the same thing with Krishna consciousness. We are becoming, or we are uncovering the dormant love for Godhead because of the training Prabhupada is giving us. A very simple program. You attend Mangala Arati, attend the whole morning program, make sure you chant your rounds. Throughout the day, do your duties, come back, go to Arati, read, and perform your other activities of service. It's a very simple program Prabhupada has given, but it's extremely effective and powerful. Because you're sandwiching your duties within Krishna consciousness. And gradually, you're actually perfecting what Varnashrama Dharma is supposed to be. Varnashrama Charavatar Purushena Parapuman Vishnur Aradyate Pantha Nanyat Tat Toshakaranat. There's no other use, purpose, need for the Varnashram Dharma other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of following Varnashram Dharma. So as devotees, it's incumbent, it is important, it is our duty to understand Varnashram Dharma. Of course, as Prabhupada is explaining, how do we affect it in current society? So many of our senior devotees are trying to affect Varnashram Dharma in our current society. Does that mean suddenly, you go out into the world and you just, put your foot down and say, okay, now that's it, none of this, politician stuff, none of this office working stuff, You guys are Shudras, you guys are Brahmanas, you guys are Vaishyas. Is it going to work? It will work if there's sufficient training. It will work if the whole system is geared towards training the living entities, especially the human beings. Of course, human beings are those who follow the Varnashram. Otherwise, they're simply animals. But training them to follow the Varnashram Dharma, it is possible. But here's the thing Prabhupada's mentioning, it struck me out the most. That Krishna is the one who designed Bhagavat Rachita. In the verse 54, Bhagavat Rachita. Bhagavat, by the Lord, Rachita, created. The Lord has created the Varnashrama system. So then you'll ask, but look what it's become now. How can something that the Supreme Lord had created has become such a situation now? Prabhupada's mentioning that it's not that it completely it becomes destroyed, it doesn't become extinguished, it still exists. And if you hear all of Prabhupada's lectures, Prabhupada's conversations about Varnashram Dharma, he'll mention this point. In society, there'll always be a class of intelligent people. There'll always be a mercantile class. There'll always be a martial class and a laborer class. Whether you like it or not, there'll always be this distinction in society. Right now we have this first class, second class, third class. Your first world country, second world country, third world country. Already there's distinction there, right? Then if you go deeper into each individual society, then in each individual society, then you have those who are, the administrators. You have the blue collar, you have the white collar. You have those who are, not even working, they're unemployed. You have simple laborers, right? You have the businessmen. Already there seems to be class. In fact, it's become such a situation that the Shudras take complete control of society now as politicians. So it's there, but it's not being properly utilized. Therefore, animalistic society. Everyone is not able to cooperate with each other properly. And Prabhupada says, what is this United Nations? If you want real United Nations, then you should follow the peace formula. Right? The peace formula be keeping Krishna in the center. But what is happening now? Prabhupada says, more and more flags are being created every year. More and more dissension, more and more separation. And you see that in what's happening in current social structure. You have those who are the middle class family, the high class family, the low class. You'll see that distinction, that segregation there. But artificially everyone wants to make everything one. And it doesn't work that way. And an example given is of China. China follows a very communistic regime where it's meant to make everyone follow the same class, the same bucket. But if you have a look who controls the society, the upper class so-called people who are managing the society, they are those who earn the most amount of money. Billions and billions of dollars. Whereas the rest of the country suffers. The rest of the people of the nation suffer. So how is that unification? How is that real communism? It's not. Again, you can see, there's a clear distinction. Just like oil and water doesn't mix, immediately there's a distinction between class of people. You can't avoid it. In fact, if you don't see Varnashram in this particular continent, in this particular globe in Bharatvarsha, if you go to the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there it's mentioning all the different dvipas. And it's mentioned in each of the dvipas, Varnashrama exists, but it's named differently. The Brahmanas are not named Brahmanas. Each of the dvipas have a different name for each of the Varnas. Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya and Shudra. They have different names, but the system is still there. So if you have a look at each of the, if you read carefully the 5th canto, you'll read that that in each of the islands of the Brahmanda, what's it called? Jambudvip, right? The whole island is called Jambudvip? Okay, what is the whole section? Bhumandala, yes. So within Bhumandala there's the 7 dvipas, and each of these dvipas you'll read about the different classes of people there. In effect, Varnashram Dharma. So even though it may not seem to be apparent, it still exists in the material universe. They still follow it through. They follow the Supreme Personality Godhead's creation. So then, how do we effect Varnashram Dharma? At least for us devotees, we should understand the very basic principles of our spiritual life, and that is surrender to the spiritual master's instructions. Varnashram Dharma, that's something we can worry about once we properly understand the basics of our spiritual life. We are dependent on the surrender, on our surrender unto our spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To that degree we will advance in Krishna consciousness. To that degree we will be transcendental to material existence. You know, as devotees, Prabhupada explains to us that as devotees we are transcending Varnashram Dharma. Devotees are transcendental. Vaishnavas are greater than Brahmanas. We've heard this before, right? Can anyone remember which section we recently heard this principle? Does anyone remember? When Jay and Vijay meet the 4 Kumaras, Prabhupada hammers it so many times, how the Vaishnavas are greater than the Brahmanas. And you'll see it later on. For example, when Prithu Maharaj, he receives the 4 Kumaras. You'll see in that section, you'll see this whole principle being mentioned, that the Vaishnava is a Brahmana, but the Brahmana is not a Vaishnava. So how the devotees are completely transcendental. They no longer need to follow the 4 Varna and ashramas, but they still follow to set an example, right? But where do we sit? Our situation is that we're in the convalescent stage. In other words, we're not completely engrossed or completely absorbed in material nature. Neither are we completely liberated. We're on the way to Krishna. We're gradually progressing towards spiritual life, pure spiritual life. And that is dictated by our surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To the degree we surrender, to that degree we'll be transcendental to material existence. And surrender is not something that, you just take initiation and that's it, I'm surrendered, I have a picture of my spiritual master, Jai Gurudev. I come to the temple once a week, once a festival. Yeah, that's enough. I do devotional service whenever I can. It's a moment-to-moment affair. Surrender means your choices must be in line with the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because we do not know what the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, we need to follow the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who will tell us what the will of the Supreme Lord is. A simple system in place. By following the instructions of the spiritual master, of senior devotees, of our mentors, then we'll become properly situated in our spiritual life. Everything we do will feed into our Krishna consciousness. You're working a job, you're supposed to Krishnaize it, Prabhupada says. You're supposed to spiritualize it, engage it in Krishna's service. So whatever you do, you offer that to Krishna, right? Yad korosi, yad asnasi, yad juhosi dadasi, yad. Simple principle. By practicing this, one is able to become fixed in their varna also. Right? Whatever one performs, that activity, that proclivity originally in the Gurukul is determined by the spiritual master. The spiritual master will teach according to the disciples' proclivities. They're able to determine, like that famous story of Gautam Rishi, right? This one small child comes to the Rishi and says, I want to enroll in your Gurukul. Please take me as your disciple. And Gautam Rishi says, okay, but what's your caste? What's your varna? What's your family background? And he says, I don't know. Let me go and ask my mother. He goes and asks his mother, and mother says, sorry, I don't know. I don't know who your father is. And the child, being non-duplicitous, goes and meets Gautam Rishi again and tells him, my mother doesn't know who my father is. And Gautam Rishi says, okay, immediately you are a Brahmin, because you're displaying that trait. You did not hide. Like for example, in the case of Karna. Karna went and received instructions from Parshuram saying that he was a Brahmana, but actually he was a Kshatriya. Right? So the spiritual master, and it's amazing how Parshuram deduces this. You know how Parshuram's taking rest on the lap of Karna, and suddenly Indra appears as a drone, or like a wasp, and starts drilling into Karna's thigh. And blood starts pouring, but Karna, being a Kshatriya, is able to tolerate. He's thinking, my Guru Maharaj is taking rest on my lap, I shouldn't disturb, so I'll tolerate. Right? In so many places it's like that. If it feels like, he was wronged. He had the intention, he was trying to serve his spiritual master. But why did it end up like this? Then Parshuram heard the blood. He got up and he realized what's happening, and then he's asking, and he immediately realized that, you've cheated me. If you were a Brahmana, you wouldn't have been able to tolerate this much pain. You're actually a Kshatriya in nature. So you have cheated and you've lied. So therefore he gives the curse immediately. That whatever he learns won't come to his aid in the time of need. So Parshuram was immediately able to understand, although it just seems to be an apparent thing, blood is coming out, he's tolerating. But the Brahmana, the spiritual master, immediately knew where he's at. Same thing here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead's the Supreme Personality of Godhead's representative knows exactly where we're at, where our consciousness is at. We just simply need to follow the guidance we're given. Otherwise, we'll be wasting time. Because over a period of time, if we do whatever we want, however we want, then what happens is that down the track we'll again come back to square one. And what will happen? The same advice will be given again. And we'll have to follow that advice. So why waste time? Might as well follow it now than later. So when we talk about applying Varna and Ashrama, we need to stick to the basic principle here is that we should stick to the spiritual master's instructions. How do we follow Ashrama? Whatever ashram we're in, we should dedicate ourselves to following that particular ashrama. Brahmacharya ashram means complete surrender to the instructions of the spiritual master and studying the Shastra. Grihastha ashram means having a proper family situated around Krishna in the center. Vanapashta ashram means mainly renunciation or tapasya, austerities and penance. And of course sannyasa is renunciation. Of course there are more items there. Krishna mentions to Uddhava. You hear Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj hearing it also. Narad Muni explaining rather to Yudhishthira Maharaj in the 7th canto. So all of these things are there. But for us, what is it? The basic principle of our Krishna consciousness is that we're sustained by surrender to the spiritual master. By doing that, then we'll be fixed in our ashram. By doing that, we'll be fixed in our occupation. By doing that, we'll be able to transcend both of them. That's the main thing. It's not that, Varnashram system, that's for the non-devotees, I'll just do whatever I like within Krishna consciousness. That's it. No, actually, to the degree we surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to that degree, we'll have shelter from the modes of material nature. If we're in the modes of nature and we don't perform our duties according to the Shastra, what happens? We will get sinful reactions. Sinful reactions just simply delay our devotional service. It just causes more suffering, more pain. And by doing that, we won't be able to relish practicing Krishna consciousness. Because by performing sinful activities, what are you doing? You're proclaiming rebellion to the Lord. You're proclaiming immediately to the Supreme Personality of Godhead the challenge that, you see, I can enjoy separately from you. So you won't be able to survive too long on that mode. You'll eventually be crushed by material existence. So again, the basic principle of Varnashrama Dharma, especially for our society in this age, is surrender to the spiritual master. That is actually the essence of devotional service. That is the essence of devotional service. Prabhupada mentions in that verse, Vavasayatmika Buddhi. You want the secret to devotional service? The secret to devotional practicing Bhakti Yoga? That is to take up the orders of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. What does that mean? Surrender. I'll end on this point. I was recently reading, I think it's in 4th canto, Pritha Maharaj's section, I believe. There it's mentioned that when Archie, when she lights the fire for Prithu Maharaj after he had left his body, and she's about to perform sati by entering into the fire, there Prabhupada explains, it's a heavy purport. In that purport, Prabhupada explains that the disciple should be ready to die to carry out the order of the spiritual master. Just as Archie, in that system of sati, the wife was ready to die to follow the husband, in the same way, if the disciple is not able to carry out the mission, or not able to effect the mission of his spiritual master, he should be ready to give up his life. So you can understand how crucial this principle of spiritual life is. It's the basic principle that sustains our spiritual life for the rest of our existence. Because it's because of that we're able to practice Krishna consciousness. That's our shelter. That's the beginning from which we're able to practice Krishna consciousness. That we've taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we've taken the shelter of the spiritual master, which means we follow their instructions. When we chanted, when we came to Krishna consciousness, someone taught us how to chant. We just followed what they said. And we immediately experienced results, right? Immediately you felt satisfaction. Immediately you felt peace, happiness. You should perform devotional service like this. Immediately we felt it, right? You should sit for kirtan, you should go for service, you should do this, you should hear Bhagavatam, you should do that. You know, we followed and we started getting result. But over a period of time, our consciousness became corrupt or becomes disturbed by material nature. That immediately the ego starts cropping up again. That we think we know how to perform devotional service. We think we know how to do everything. And we take what Prabhupada says is, devotees are transcendental. We take that for granted and we do whatever we like. But no, everything should be grounded and anchored on the orders of the spiritual master. Anchored in surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His representative. If we do that, then we're transcendental. Then we're on the transcendental platform. Although we may not be completely pure. Like Prabhupada gives the example of the raw mango and the ripened mango. Mango is mango. How it becomes ripened is just simply a matter of time. So immediately we need to Krishnaize our life by following the orders of the spiritual master. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the basic, is the beginning, I guess. That we should read Srimad Bhagavatam because it's a glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who chants will develop love of God. But once you develop love of God, you want to know who that person you love is. Srimad Bhagavatam is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the literary form. And by taking shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand so much about the Supreme Lord and His creation, and how to take shelter of Him, and how all of the systems He's put in place are geared for that goal.